eCommerce Stories is a podcast where you'll meet owners of thriving Shopify Plus and Shopify stores, app developers, and industry experts. Inspirational case studies, success stories, e-commerce challenges, and specialist knowledge. Let's get started.
In today's episode, I'm talking to Sabrina Jansen, head of Sales DACH at Divante, and the topic of our conversation will be, among other, DACH market, customers' habits, e-commerce development, and we will answer the question what customers from this region do not like. So let's start it. And Sabrina, so first question. As head of Sales DACH in Divante, you have a very wide knowledge of clients in this area. And if you were to identify the characteristics of a group of those customers, what would it be? What shopping habits do they have?
Yeah. So first of all, hi Zofia, and thanks a lot for the invitation actually to the podcast. Very happy to be here. And yes, so the question about like the characteristics. I mean, there may be a few characteristics which are quite relevant here in the DACH region and especially in Germany. So I would say one topic is definitely the topic of security, quality of data. So this whole topic around GDPR is very relevant for German customers. So they are very selective when it comes to which data do they leave where. So this is definitely a topic I would say is very characteristic for German customers. Another thing is that German customers are very demanding when it comes to, for example, return policies, when it comes to delivery, when it comes to payment options. So return rates in Germany are quite high, which is not like this in every country. So this is definitely a special characteristic. I mean, there are different reports. Some say it's on average 10%. Some even say it's on average 50%. Of course, it always depends on the market and the industry we're talking about, but they are quite high. So Germans also expect to have good return policies. Although I have to say there's a little bit of shift, so we see that sustainability also becomes more and more important, and customers are more and more aware of this topic. So there's also, for example, a trend when it comes to secondhand clothing or rental clothing, right? So this is also something we see here in Germany as well. So maybe there's a little trend or turnaround going on.
It's very interesting, and I think it's worth adding here that, for example, if you are a store owner and you are thinking about migrating to a given foreign market, you must, in my opinion, must understand these customers and his habits. So you need to know who your target customers are and how to reach
Absolutely.
them. And knowing shipping habits help with this. So for the German clients, the security is on the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So data security and everything when it comes to that is definitely a hot topic.
And actually, regarding various reports on the development and trends on the DACH market, I am particularly attracted by information on payment methods, which you mentioned also. And in 2023, it is expected that 35% of the orders will be processed through open invoices. And the next places are taken by digital wallets and debit cards. And for me, it's really interesting. Can you tell where the reason for paying with invoices came from? And do you see this trend on a daily basis?
Yeah, Germans love to pay invoices via an invoice and just transfer the money. I think there are two main reasons for it. One is maybe reflecting like the offline world as well, because although Germany is, of course, a modern country, but when it comes to card payment and using your credit card, it's not as advanced as, for example, the Nordics are. So, I mean, I'm living in Berlin and I still have many places where I cannot pay with card and I only can pay cash. So, and this is, I think, a little bit reflecting also on e-commerce, why people just like to pay via invoice and just via the money. And the second reason is, again, related to security reasons. So because people are used to just pay either cash or via money to whoever, they are very more concerned or restrictive when it comes to leaving credit card details online, where they don't know exactly what is happening or what is happening with the details. And this is, I think, the second reason why we still have this high percentage of invoices and paying via invoice.
And I think that those payment trends will definitely keep changing. And it wasn't a long time ago when the phones and smartwatches payments came to Europe and around the world. And now some platforms allow us to pay with cryptocurrency. So we will see what the future.
True. Yes.
Yeah. So
it will all change, even if it takes us a little bit longer, maybe. But it will definitely change, yeah.
And here, certainly, the behavior of buyers is influenced by definitely many factors. But I would like to know if you have noticed any changes, both among customers but also among store owners, in this, if I can call that, post-pandemic reality. How it's looked like from your side?
Yeah. So I think like we all agree that the pandemic has changed like the e-commerce market tremendously, and I'm convinced that it changed forever. So I don't think there's a way back to pre-pandemic situation. So I think from a customer perspective, many people started to buy online, maybe also have never bought before online, because it was easier, maybe the only way in some cases to buy something. So I think there's a whole new customer base coming from the pandemic or a time of the pandemic. And on the other side, it also means, or it's the same actually for retailers, right? So the pandemic forced retailers to digitize their business much faster than many maybe have ever expected. So I think there are a lot of, for example, local shop owners who had a shop around the corner and then just started selling online because that was the only way they could actually sell something. So, and this is also where this whole click and collect topic became a massive thing, so that you could place your order online and then just go to your shop in the city center or around the corner and just pick it up there. So I think this is a massive trend and development we've seen there, and also because it was the only, or e-commerce was the only way really to sell and buy. The market has grown, the competition has grown as well. Customers are anyways already demanding, and I think this also this time also for or made them even more demanding in the market, because there's also so much competition, needed to take care of the customer expectations even more. So because the customer can just go wherever they want to buy something. So they are not stuck to one store. There's so many possibilities. And now that there are even more e-commerce business, even more possibilities. So for customer expectations, this was for sure also developing more and more in this time.
I definitely agree that the pandemic has changed the entire e-commerce market, showing in one hand its power, but also putting it to many tests, and maybe also in the context of the technological approach. And this is my another question for you: what technological approach is closer to the heart of DACH store owner? Dedicated solution, open source, maybe SaaS?
Yeah, this is a very tricky question. It's actually not so easy to answer,
Okay.
Zofia, because um, I think it depends, of course, on a lot on the type of business we are talking about. So every business is specific, and they have different demands or requirements. In general, I think you could say that, of course, SaaS solutions are growing and growing. And I would say it's also the solution which is the most preferred because it has a few advantages, like it's
Time
quicker,
to
it's
market.
less. Yeah, the time to market is much faster. It's less effort for setting everything up, setting up the infrastructure. It's less effort for maintaining the software, as usually the provider's taking care of these things. So it has these advantages. But on the other hand, it also means that, for example, it may not always be that flexible. So when it comes to extensions, for example, or customization, it's not necessarily always that easy. So it has also a little bit of downsides. And maybe one thing which is interesting to mention here is the model of PaaS, actually, so platform as a service, because this is more combining, on the one side, the flexibility of the open source solutions, for example, like Shopware or Magento, originally coming from open source, but also with the power of like fully managed infrastructure and fully managed operational services. So I think this is maybe the even more the trend and interesting for customers to use.
And I think it's impossible not to say here about the headless approach as well. What is your opinion? Do you see a lot of this type of implementation with your clients? If so, where does it came from? What goal do such clients want to achieve with the headless approach?
Yeah, definitely Headless is a very important topic, and it's something we at Divante, for example, we really believe that this is the future of e-commerce. And as we're all about, or at least try to be innovative, and we want to really be part of this shaping the future of e-commerce, we started even a couple of years ago when it was not that big of a topic. And dealing with this and working on headless solutions, which haven't been there. For example, View Storefront is the best example for it. It's something we created within Divante a couple of years ago, and it's now a company which is a massive player in the whole PWA market. So I think that also supports this idea that headless is really getting more and more relevant. And there are also several pain points I think clients would really like to solve with this approach. But I would say mainly it's about becoming more flexible. So when it comes to, for example, implementing solutions, you really want to, which really bring benefit for you. So like this best of breed approach, selecting solutions which are really a fit for you and really fit to your needs, payment, etc. And I think it also helps this flexibility with reducing, for example, deployment cycles, yeah, or fixes, because you have this back end and front end separated. And these are the things I would say are mainly relevant when it comes to the reasons why people decide to go headless.
Yeah, building an e-commerce ecosystem based on a headless approach, in my opinion, will be a trend for the near future, definitely, and I hope so
Yeah.
that it will be like that.
You are listening to the e-commerce stories podcast.
And now e-commerce is a really whole ecosystem, just like I mentioned before. But I'm really curious, without what external system the owner of the stores in DACH market cannot imagine running their businesses? Maybe ERP, maybe product information management system, CMS.
I think so. For example, let's say ERP. I would say most of the companies are using ERP systems. I hardly come across merchants or retailers who don't have ERP system. This is for sure something which is really important. When it comes to PIM, I would say this depends a little bit on the business, because it depends on like how many products do you really have, what kind of assets do you have, like how many variables and so on. If you really need an external PIM system, or is it maybe something which you can use within your platform. But in general, I would say PIMs are getting more and more relevant, because people understand that it is really important to have a clean and structured product data. So I would say this part is growing, becoming more and more relevant. And CMSs, in my opinion, are also really, really important, because as we already talked about customer expectations when it comes to customer experience, so CMSs are increasingly important as customer experience and customer expectations are growing as well. And of course, besides that, I would say payment providers are really important, and search as well.
So ERP system is like a standard. Additional one is depend on the business needs. But I think that over the years, the feeling that the online store is only one of the puzzle has grown definitely, and the merchants realize that there are systems that allow you to automate some work or even optimize processes. So building this ecosystem is one of the most important thing. But I'd like to also ask you some maybe tricky question, but I'm really curious. What irritates the customers of online store from the DACH market the most?
Good question. Of course, this is probably everyone has a different answer to it, depending on the experience they have made, the experience they have made. But I think maybe it's a bit related to what we already said earlier. So user experience, like the flow on the website. So the less clicks,
Yeah.
the better. The easier you find things, the better. That also means search is key. If you don't have a good search and people cannot find what they are looking for, this is definitely a reason to bounce straight away. Performance. So no one likes high loading times. And then we come a little bit back to what we discussed earlier: returns, free returns. As I said, like Germans like to return stuff. So free returns are expected. Delivery costs, like free delivery, would be ideal. Um, and I think a plus would be even if you could choose your preferred delivery option.
Okay.
And when you get the information when the package will be
So I
delivered.
think that we are going to another question, because what condition must the store meet for our customers from those countries to make a purchase in a foreign store? So, for example, if I have store here in Poland or in England, and I'd like to sell also product in German, for example, what I need to do? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is well
Yeah.
connected. I think having, for example, a store with an URL from the country like Germany, Austria, that would definitely help, because it would feel the customer or the German. It looks sounds maybe weird, German customer, but I think in general it makes the customer more secure, right? So if they see like this with a German URL, gives a bit more feeling of security. And of course, adapting to the most important things, like I've already mentioned, payment options, no delivery providers which are known in the countries as well and are frequently used. And then I think we can also mention actually Switzerland as a quite interesting example, because this is maybe a bit different. There you can see that every country has really some specifics people need to take care of when they want to sell in these countries. For example, I mean, first of all, Switzerland has their own currency, right? So people maybe want to buy in the local currency. Switzerland has 3 official languages. So that would actually probably increase the amount of languages you would need to add into your store. And then we have like, for example, differences when it comes to shipping costs. Customs play a huge part when it comes to shipping to Switzerland. So you really need to take care that papers are really filled out properly as well. So this is definitely something where you can see that every country has the local requirements which you need to take care of.
Okay, and in general, we are talking here about also about e-commerce development. And my next question for you is, as for Germany, in the context of Shopify Plus, it is the 5th market in the world in terms of the development of this platform. Germany is also they are in 3rd place when it comes to the Magento implementation. You also mentioned about Magento earlier, and first when it comes to the shopware. So those are definitely impressive results, and I'm really curious what's behind it. What is behind such German involvement in this whole ecosystem of e-commerce, of course?
I would say that there is a correlation between e-commerce and Germany being overall a really big economy. So Germany is the 4th biggest economy in the world. So that I think automatically also means that there's also a huge market in terms of online business, not only offline. And this is also why it's growing, and therefore it's also an interesting market actually for e-com players like platforms. You mentioned Magento, Shopify. So of course, US-based companies like Magento or Canada like Shopify are really interested in getting into these massive markets. A shopware, I think, is a bit easier to explain because they are German-based companies, so this is their home market. But yeah, and of course, it means also a lot of competition. So there are lots of players who are already either established or want to start their business here. But I think it's mainly because it's really a really big market.
And I think it's also a very dynamic market. And actually, I had the opportunity to be at the e-commerce expo in Berlin on May 5th, and the fair was visited by nearly 8,000 visitors. So it also shows the power of this market, definitely. And I would also like to talk a bit about the projects themselves, about the e-commerce project themselves. What, in the case of e-commerce implementation project, is the most important to you? What do you consider definitely key elements?
Okay. For me, so first of all, I mean, implementation projects are usually quite complex, right? They take at least several months. They go through several phases. They have ups, but they also have downs. And I think, therefore, it's really important that, because I'm usually the first touch point for the customer, right? And I'm following them, or I'm at their side like every step of the way. So for me, what's really important in there is like trust and transparency, because if you promise things at the very beginning and you cannot keep up to them later on, you will have a problem. Yeah. So of course, I mean, there are many variables influencing a project, and things will not always go perfectly as planned. So requirements will change, assumptions will change during the process and during the project. So that's normal. But I think it's really important that you are transparent with your client, that you guide them as well. So it's not about sell something for the sake of selling, but be really a sparring partner for the client. And I think this would be something which for me personally is the most important
I
thing.
totally agree with you. The transparency is, in my opinion, also a key to success. And I'm also really like to look at the project like a whole process. And when we are talking about the stages of the project, in my opinion, a good, reliable analysis is also a key, really important element. And
Yes.
I also like to
Yeah.
look at the e-commerce project as a house building project. When you go to the architect, you tell him what you need, what solution you are interested in, what is important, the most important for you. Only on this basis, the architect estimates how much a given project will cost and, of course, how long it will take.
That's true. I mean, this is I think, a good point. Like this whole analysis phase, we call it discovery phase, is for the project itself and the
Yes.
success of the project. Although it's not the longest part of the project, but it's the most important one. That's also what we keep telling our clients, that these first weeks, let's say, are the most important thing, because the the more you analyze, or if you really analyze it properly, the less problems you will have later on, and the less time it will take you during the implementation phase. So I agree. This is definitely from just from a project perspective and from a different phases, the most important
And
one.
what do you think? How does it look from the point of view of the owner of online store, from your market? What is the most important in project for them? Also the transparency, the analyze, maybe some other point.
Uh, I would say so. I mean, I think this. Let's say, for example, if you have a customer who's maybe not that tech savvy, right? So I think for them, and this is what I realized in talks with customers as well, when they don't have this massive um, software team, development team in house, so they are not coming like from a real technical perspective, but maybe more from a marketing side, for example. For them, it's also super important, especially in such a long and complex project, to be guided. So that they have someone who runs ideas with them and just checks, does it make sense? Does it make sense to do it this way or that way? And this is what they are really, what is really important for them. But also, for example, if they just start with their online business. And one other aspect is, I mean, the people we are usually dealing with in projects, they also have to report to someone usually. So they also have a board, investors they need to report to. So budget, timeline are in general the most, or the key elements decision makers are mainly interested in. So this is definitely something which is important as well. And for example, it can also be that the company is still using legacy systems where they have deadlines when to switch them off. So these are also things which you need to take into consideration when it comes to timeline. So I think these would be in general the
Really,
main
really
ones.
interesting. And Sabrina, at the end, if you were to point out 3 tips for those who have an online store but want to expand their businesses and develop the DACH market, what would it be?
Okay, so first of all, I would say, as we've now talked a lot about like local requirements and payment and deliveries and so on. So I think it makes sense if you get yourself also a local expert who knows the legal specifics of the different countries and the aspects which need to be considered in that area. So I think this is really important. Pay attention to the local delivery option, payment option, and so on. And what something we haven't mentioned before is, and this would be the third thing, I think it's really important to have also then your website in the local language, and really take care of a good translation of your website into the local language you're selling in. And maybe something to be added there, having local customer service would definitely also be a big plus.
So,
as well.
Sabrina, thank you very much for this conversation. Lots of really interesting information, and I'm pretty sure that our listeners will learn a lot about the DACH market from this episode. And I also think, if you don't mind, that in the description we will also include a link to your LinkedIn profile and contact information if anyone would like to learn a little bit more about your market. I think it will be the best option to contact you. And dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode, and take care.
You listen to the eCommerce Stories podcast hosted by Zofia. Are you hungry for substantive knowledge about e-commerce? Stay with us for longer. Hear you soon.